A fund from the UAE is buying $2 billion worth of a digital coin created by the Trump-owned platform World Liberty Financial. The president is listed as its chief crypto advocate, along with his sons. The company called it, quote, the single largest ever investment in a crypto company, but did not respond to questions about how much the Trump family would profit from it.
This is corrupt on its face, but it is likely illegal. You probably don't have to scratch very deep to find an instance where the president has received an enormous infusion of cash to his crypto coin from a CEO or foreign oligarch who is then asking for a favor from Donald Trump. A president of the United States should not be running a backdoor bribery scheme, the equivalent of posting your Cash app on the White House webpage.
It's been almost 4 years since the launch of Miami Coin. You may remember that we were the first people to tell you that Miami Mayor Francis Suarez was pumping and probably dumping this shitcoin that had no useful application. It was barely even an unregistered security. It was just an absolute meme coin trash. And it seemed abundantly clear from the jump. The thing about crypto, and as it turns out, a constitutional republic, is that it's like Tinkerbell. We all just have to believe in it. And as long as we keep believing in it, it will continue to exist. Here's the thing. We didn't know what the hell this Miami Coin thing was for. Was it some sort of money laundering scheme? Was it a pump and dump? Was it some way to funnel money to the mayor or city commissioners because the city itself was getting a vig off the trades? And in fact, the city did gross something like over $5 million on a coin that is currently worth, Miami Coin, 0.00006121 dollars.
So not a penny.
I have to,
not a tenth of a penny.
Thank God the current president, in his infinite wisdom, stopped making the penny. I don't think we still make a 0.00006121 percent of a penny. My point is, as it always is, the Miami of today is the America of tomorrow. And what we now have was abundantly clear scheme and a scam down here in Miami is now in the White House. You heard Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy talking about this being one of the biggest bribery scandals in the history of the American presidency. To tell us more about it, we have Molly White, cryptocurrency critic, technology researcher, and software engineer, and author of citationneeded.news. Molly, you've been following this all the way through. I don't even know really where to begin because there's the Trump meme coin, then there's this like World Liberty Financial kind of instrument as well. Then we just saw this story about a $2 million investment from a foreign nation, from Abu Dhabi, into the president and his son's private business. We saw a raffle, I guess, sort of this weird semi-ish legal raffle to win a dinner or something at the White House with the president. How do you begin to explain this to lay people, what it is that's going on here?
Well, Trump is really using cryptocurrency to enrich himself at this point. He's discovered no end to the, ways through which he can raise funds for himself personally, not even for his campaign, using the meme coin, using this venture called World Liberty Financial, which he, profits substantially from. His Trump media company, which runs Truth Social, is also getting into cryptocurrency. He's got NFTs. I mean, the list really kind of goes on at this point. And he's begun very directly trading access to himself as the president for cryptocurrency. We've seen that through this new dinner that he's announced, where the top holders of the Trump meme coin will be invited to a private dinner with the president. I just did some analysis on those holders. The majority of them are not based in the United States, which adds additional concerns over emoluments and, foreign agents registration. And so, this is sort of a new avenue for corruption that Trump is taking full advantage of.
And you've got these companies. There's a logistics company that is like going to borrow like $20 million. They don't have it, but I think they're going to borrow $20 million so that they can, quote unquote, invest in this token, and explicitly for the purpose of lobbying or convincing the president to change U.S.-Mexico trade policy. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. And we've seen the same thing happening from cryptocurrency companies and other crypto entities as well. For example, Justin Sun is a crypto billionaire who purchased $75 million worth of Trump's World Liberty Financial token. And then shortly after the inauguration, the lawsuit against him and his company from the Securities and Exchange Commission was dropped, or rather paused pending resolution, likely to be dropped. Very directly benefiting Sun and his companies. And that was a case alleging fraud, no less.
I've talked extensively about public corruption in this program and the way politicians in South Florida exploit their public office for private profit. I don't think we've seen anything on this scale before, where you're talking about figures in multi-billion dollars. You're talking about it all happening rather transparently in an effort to effectuate policy and to buy access to the president of the United States. But you're also seeing the president changing policy, changing the country's policy on crypto specifically in a way that directly enriches himself and his family. Tell us about that.
Right. So Trump has been very active in influencing both legislation that's being proposed as well as the regulations that are currently being enforced or previously were being enforced. His directions to various entities within the government have directly been cited by the SEC, for example, when they've dropped a number of cases against cryptocurrency companies, many of them with prejudice, so they cannot be refiled. Further cases that were going to court, ongoing investigations have been dropped. He's launched this stablecoin entity, or this stablecoin, via his World Liberty Financial project, as there is stablecoin legislation making its way through Congress that he stands to benefit from. And so he's, very much conflicted in terms of his engagements with the cryptocurrency world, because he is writing the rules and creating a favorable business environment while also enriching himself via crypto ventures.
This is a deregulation of an industry that was barely being regulated to begin with. And in fact, by all objective accounts, is worthy of scrutiny. I mean, I hear from crypto true believers all the time that there's really only two legit coins. There's Bitcoin and there's Ethereum, and that everything else is nonsense. And when you're in a sector where even the devout believers are telling you that, 99% of this other stuff is a scam. I'm like, okay, wait, hang on. If your argument is 99%, but this, doesn't that require a level of scrutiny and regulation that is now being rolled back?
You would certainly think so. And it's pretty incredible to watch the cryptocurrency industry and its lobbyists make this case that during the Biden administration, the regulators were being too harsh to crypto and that they were killing the industry by trying to enforce very standard regulations that are used elsewhere in the financial system. Because, during that time period, we saw the collapse of FTX. We saw the collapse of Celsius, whose CEO is literally being sentenced as we speak for his fraud in that company. We saw the failures of regulations to be applied to this industry. And yet somehow the industry is claiming that these very limited regulations that are in place were too over the top and that they were killing the industry and that they need to be rolled back. And that's exactly what's been happening. They are getting every wish under the Trump administration.
One of the things about crypto that's been uniquely disturbing to me is all of the arguments that people have made to me about it, by and large, have turned out to be untrue. It's a hedge against inflation. It's not. It somehow has a practical application beyond just the casino of the unregulated security, that there's somehow you can use it to pay bills and things or whatever. That's very rare in the crypto space outside of the major two, if you will. The idea that it's somehow untethered from market realities or from the stock market, even these so-called stable coins that they're always $1. Well, we found that that's not true either. These stable coins are in fact quite unstable and unpredictable when dealing with the same market forces that every other security or stock or industry is impacted by. And finally, the democratization of banking somehow. The idea that, again, for people who believe that a man who shits on a gold toilet is really looking out for the plumber who services that toilet or the common man, the working class of America. The headline this week is 58 crypto wallets have made millions on Trump's meme coin. 764,000 have lost money. So once again, we have a financial system that really only benefits the top, 1% or less of holders or hodlers or whatever the hell they call it. So my question, Molly, is anybody benefiting from these Trump meme coins? And if so, who?
Well, Trump and his family are very much benefiting from it. I mean, they earn a substantial amount of money through selling the tokens onto the market, as well as they continue to make money through trading fees. And so, for example, when this dinner was announced and people began trading the coin more actively because they wanted to secure an invitation to dinner, millions of dollars in trading fees were generated, and most of those go to Trump and Trump affiliates because they're the ones providing liquidity for these tokens. And so it's very lucrative for Trump directly. As you mentioned, there's also the sort of small minority of buyers who are able to buy early enough and at low enough prices and then time the markets to sell high. But as various reports have indicated, that's not the majority of people. These tokens are very volatile. It's challenging to time the markets well. And frankly, because of the lack of regulation and oversight of these markets, there's a dramatic amount of market manipulation. And so oftentimes people are trying to speculate on these tokens in rigged environments where they are trading against people who have inside information or who have an advantage because of their relationship with the trading platforms. And so, the idea that this is sort of, a free for all where you can, take your chances and, potentially make it big is not even really accurate, because the environment that people are working in is stacked against them.
Having spent the last, I don't know, is it 8 years? Certainly feels like 80 years hearing about Hunter Biden and all of the nefarious activity that he was alleged to have been involved with all over the country.
The laptop.
Trading on his father's name and exploiting his father's office to... We now have the Trump sons, in just the less than 2 weeks alone, announcing 3 multi-billion-dollar deals in 3 separate foreign countries who have a very serious and vested interest in influencing American policy and the American president, including, these are businesses, by the way, that the president runs or the president is involved with. His sons are representatives on his behalf, but they're not, just private citizens out in the free market. And many of these deals, as we had mentioned, involve this crypto hustle. I want to quantify this a bit. The headline this week, Molly, Trump family's net worth has increased by $2.9 billion with a B dollars, thanks to crypto investments, new report says. Is that right? The net worth of the Trump family has increased this year by nearly $3 billion thanks to this crypto hustle?
Yeah, I mean, that is entirely believable from what I have seen. He's made hundreds of millions of dollars easily off of the meme coins. He receives 75% of the net protocol revenues from World Liberty Financial, not to mention he holds a 60% majority stake in the company. His crypto ventures seem to be growing by the week. There's been rumors of a new crypto coin potentially being launched by the Truth Social platform, which he also owns a majority stake or a major stake in. There's been rumors of a crypto game that he's thinking of launching. That's sort of Monopoly type game where people would use cryptocurrencies to play this mobile game, I believe.
So stupid.
And so he's just clearly,
You're really pissing
enriching
Roy
himself.
off, Molly. You're really pissing him off.
Because now you're going to get kids to play this game. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing here?
Yeah, I mean, that's been a serious problem with crypto gaming in the past, is that it really invites, very vulnerable people, including children, to get involved in the type of, gamified gambling, essentially. It's, they are using real money and often losing real money in these crypto games.
Well, these kids have got to do something while they're vaping. I mean, they're not just going to sit around, smoking and not do something else to distract themselves. Last question, Molly. Is this legal, or should it be legal?
Well, it is illegal for the president to accept, money for influence.
Good, impeach him.
That is hater. She's a hater.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, it is plainly illegal. I think the question is whether anything will happen about it, because we've seen the regulators backing off. I mean, the Trump himself has helped dismantle the cryptocurrency investigations team at the Department of Justice. He's directed the major frauds unit at the Department of Justice to stop focusing on cryptocurrency and instead focus on things like immigration fraud and procurement fraud, things like that. And then, of course, we've seen, some muted opposition in Congress that, people speaking up against his very blatant grifts, but it has yet to amount to much. There's been some talk of Congress people stalling the stablecoin bill that is making its way through Congress as we speak. But it's even, yet to be determined if that will be successful. I think largely because the degree of influence the crypto lobby has had over Congress, not to mention just the president. So, yes, I think it is illegal. It's quite plainly illegal. But the question is, will anything happen?
This is the golden age of grifting here in America. As I said, Florida of today is the America of tomorrow, which means that the Florida and Miami of yesterday is the America of right fucking now. And just everybody knows this. And I'm going to leave on a clip from my friends, the Good Liars, interviewing outside a Trump rally, a very proud MAGA man in his Make America Great Again hat, and also a very proud Bitcoin trader wearing a Bitcoin shirt as well. And I'll give him the last word.
They're only buying Bitcoin. Everything else is a scam.
Only buy Bitcoin? Everything else is a scam?
Correct, yeah. Only Bitcoin.
So Donald Trump launched his meme coin. Was that a scam?
I love Trump, but yes. Yes, it was a scam.
This is as Miami a story as you can possibly get. And it is so Miami that we require a Miami whisperer, a Miami translator, a Rosetta Stone, a someone to crack the Da Vinci Code of this story, because it is so... It's par for the course in Miami, but I'm concerned that people outside of Miami are going to have absolutely no idea where to begin with this. So let's start with the headline. Miami-Dade elections supervisor hires no-show Miami employee Jenny Nillo. Now, where to begin? Because obviously, who is the Miami-Dade elections supervisor? Who is Jenny Nillo? How did we get here? So the first thing I'll say is that the election supervisor used to be a politically appointed position. The county mayor would appoint that person. It was a woman for a long time by the name of Christina White, who was a professional. She's worked for Republican mayors, for Democratic mayors, and has done I think by and large, a pretty good job in a very difficult position in a very tough town. And now, thanks to a constitutional amendment, a state constitutional amendment, we now have to elect officers like a sheriff in Dade County, like a tax collector, property appraiser, and even more importantly, an election supervisor. This is now a partisan political position, which no bueno, muy malo, okay? It shouldn't be, I don't care who wins or who's running, it should not be a partisan political position. You should have to be a professional. You should have to know what you're doing. And in fact, the person who won, Alina Garcia, knows so little about the job that she hired Christina White to stay on because she has no idea what she's doing. And she has turned it into really nothing more than a partisan political position. And where does she come from, Alina Garcia? Who are her political Sherpas and godfathers? You're not going to believe this cast of characters and how Jenny Nillo gets involved. And so my translator for all this, when you need to know what's going on and why it's happening and what the sordid telenovela-esque history is with these multi-generational political crime families here in Miami, you go to politicalcortadito.com. You talk to Elaine de Valle, a.k.a. Ladra, and Elaine has been a journalist in this market for decades. 18 of those years, she was at the Miami Herald, a part of 2 Pulitzer Prize-winning teams, including the team that exposed the most corrupt local election in the history of this country. Well, this country, if you include Miami in this country. The 1997 Miami mayoral election of Xavier Suarez, the father of Francis Suarez, versus, you know who.
I mean, it's like
It's
NFL coaches.
1997, dude. It's like, yes. That's why I say in Miami, we don't recycle our trash. We re-elect it. Elaine, thank you so much for being here. Tell me, Alina Garcia, what is her Miami political pedigree so people understand the kind of character we're talking about here?
Okay, well, as you know, but I don't know if your watchers, your viewers know, Alina Garcia began her political career as an assistant to David Rivera when he was in the Florida State House, and later became a congressman before he was charged with rigging an election. She's also worked for Jimmy Patronis. She worked with Joe Carollo, who you know very well, our esteemed Miami commissioner. And she also worked with Frank Artiles, who was recently sentenced to probation in an election rigging case as well. So she has experience in elections. She knows all about them, but she knows about rigging them, which is why it's a difficult thing to know that she's our elections supervisor. You're right about Christina White. She is the chief executive officer, which really means that she's running elections still, which thank God. But Alina Garcia has turned the elections department sort of into a Republican outpost. She invited the Republican Party to go and take a tour. They were given gift bags. And it just seems like it's a little bit inappropriate. She was also at the investiture ceremony for the interim Hialeah mayor, Jackie Garcia Rose, who took over for Esteban Bovo. She's there smiling, taking pictures with, Jackie Garcia Rose, with Rene Garcia, who's a Miami-Dade commissioner that's poised to run for Hialeah mayor. There's a Hialeah election this year. There's a Miami election this year. It just seems kind of weird to have our election supervisor, the person who's going to be arbitrating these elections, hobnobbing and rubbing elbows and chumming up with the candidates in these elections.
Not a professional, a partisan, not a professional, not an objective, fair person, and apparently doesn't even know how to do the job, such that she had to keep Christina White on.
Right. Well, thank goodness for that.
Thank goodness for that. And I don't believe that. I think Christina White is a professional, and I think that she's not going to be a part of anything nefarious, but we'll get to that in just a moment. I need to rewind because you listed this cast of characters here, starting with David Rivera, who was...
I wonder if I forgot anybody.
So David Rivera was not charged in rigging that election, but was implicated in it by the two people that were charged in it. He was not a co-conspirator. He was the mastermind of the entire scheme, this election fraud scheme, David Rivera, that sent two of his co-conspirators that he recruited into the election fraud conspiracy, sent them to federal prison, but miraculously somehow not him. I guess sometimes it pays to be Marco Rubio's former bag man. Also, Joe Carollo, for crying out loud. I mean, Joe Carollo. I mean, we know this guy is a kind of famous character on this show. And, of course, Frank Artilles, who you mentioned, who was not only arrested and charged, but convicted of election fraud. And Alina Garcia, so this is who she learned how to be an election supervisor from some literal fraudsters who famously were implicated and or charged in a litany of alleged crimes. Let me ask you this, Elaine, because maybe a lot of people in Miami don't know this either. Alina Garcia was allegedly a boletera. What do you know about that? And more importantly, what the hell is a boletera?
Well, a boletera is someone who collects ballots, typically in Hispanic, high Republican areas, typically in elderly housing. It was very, very common in the throughout the early 2000s and through 2010, 2011, the 2012 elections. Both of those were touched by absentee ballot fraud. That's, very much documented both in Political Cortadito and in a piece that I did in collaboration with Univision. Yes, boleteras collect. They basically collect the ballots, and the fear is, and we do have evidence of boleteras who will change ballots or will throw away ballots that don't coincide with their chosen candidate.
Or I believe will fill them out in advance, their chosen candidates, and hand them off to the elderly voter to sign.
Or tell them how to fill it out or who to fill out too. So those are things that we did catch people doing. And according to the stories of the people who know her, that's how she started. That's how a lot of our the people in my generation and her generation started in the political world as boleteros and boleteras, because it was very common back then.
So these are boleteros and boleteras, male and female use, O and A. They are effectively, it means absentee ballot broker or absentee ballot bundler, but you can only imagine the kind of nefariousness that these folks can find themselves in. And in fact, it has been adjudicated in several cases, not the least of which the 1997 mayoral election, in which dead people voted. What Carl Hyacin referred to as Manny Yip and his buddies down at the cemetery. These were super voters. These were people who voted in every single election since their deaths. Okay, and these were schemes that were cooked up by boleteros and boleteras, effectively filling out these ballots and being involved in alleged forged signatures, etc. So you have a former boletera who was trained by some of the most corrupt characters in the city of Miami, including known, convicted election fraudsters, who is now the election supervisor in Miami-Dade County.
Hashtag because Miami.
So who then is Jenny Nillo? And how the hell does she get involved in this? So this woman was fired from the city of Miami. Can you imagine what it takes, Roy, to get fired from the city of Miami? You know what you'd have to do? You'd have to have a no-show job. You'd have to be drinking and driving on the job while you're on the taxpayer dime running personal errands. She did all of those things and then some. So, Elaine, who is Jenny Nillo? What happened to her at the city of Miami? And ¿dónde está now?
Jenny, where's Jenny? Huh? Hashtag where's Jenny? Jenny Nillo is really funny. She was fired from the community redevelopment agency, the Omni Community Redevelopment Agency, after she was found to be, doing personal errands on the job and drinking and driving, stopping for cans of beer. I don't know how she wasn't arrested for drinking and driving, because that's what she was doing. But she was.
I'm sorry, that was what she was doing when she was pulled over by law enforcement, who was surveilling her in a criminal investigation, and in fact saw her criming and saw her drinking and driving. That's why they felt obligated to finally basically break their cover and pull her over. But Roy, she wasn't arrested for drinking and driving.
We've talked about her extensively a couple of years ago when this happened.
The Friends and Family program here in Miami. So she doesn't get arrested, though, but she does get fired. Why?
Well, she got fired because she was using the city car to do private things, and I think that's they didn't even say anything about the drinking in the car. I don't think, but she got hired right away by the district, by Alex de Portilla, for his district office, because he was still in office then. He had not yet been arrested and suspended for corruption charges, which are completely different. But anyway, so Jenny Nillo worked at the city up until 2023, I believe, or maybe even last year. And then now she is working at the elections department. She is Alina Garcia's executive secretary, making $45,000 a year. I did get her application, but I haven't been able to get an answer from the elections department whether or not this position was advertised, whether or not there was any other applicants, because it just seems like there might have been maybe some other qualified people in the county that could have taken that job. But I think it was either a favor or, and this occurred to me later after I wrote the piece, maybe Jenny knows something, because there's these people go way back. Like you said, they're part of the same political pond, which produces scum. I'm not saying they're scum, but ponds produce scum. And so they're part of the same pond. And it just doesn't make any sense.
Hang on, but I don't want to say you buried the lead, because there's so many leads in this story. But Jenny Nillo, back in 2017, was sentenced to 36 months in federal prison for mortgage fraud. This is prior to her being hired for this obviously bogus bullshit position, no-show job at the city of Miami, which was clearly a gift from Alex Diaz-Portillo, the disgraced ex, because he was removed from office by Governor Ron DeSantis because he was arrested for bribery, money laundering, and campaign finance violations, which the charges were subsequently dropped. I have to say that because it's true. But then she gets fired by the city. Then she gets hired by him to basically run his personal errands on the taxpayer time, the taxpayer dime, and to allegedly drive drunk in a city of Miami vehicle. Which, by the way, the liability for taxpayers for this person to drive drunk in a city-owned vehicle. But nobody seems to care. She keeps getting these public positions. And now, though, but Elaine, you talked to Alex Diaz-Portillo, who's probably drunk texting you, if I had to guess. But he is allegedly or threatening to run for mayor in the city of Miami, this cesspool of a race this year for city mayor. And you know Jenny to be part of Team DLP, right? What did he say to you about this?
Well, I asked him if he was going to take her to the mayor's office should he win the election, and he said, yeah, she's part of his team. And that was after it was before I found out that Jenny was working at the elections department, which kudos to Tess Risky at the Miami Herald, because she broke the story. I only followed. And then, but it was after she got hired. Do you understand what I mean? So she was already there, and she's on his team. That's kind of it certainly raises some concern.
Well, when you have a person, not only a person with a criminal record like hers and an embarrassing public employment record such as Jenny Nillo, but you have someone who, a very shady politician, accused and in fact arrested for at one time money laundering, bribery, and campaign finance crimes, who is telling you that this person is a part of his political team, and she is now embedded in the Miami-Dade County elections offices, which leads me to this next question in terms of, certainly our ongoing thesis of the Miami of today is the America of tomorrow. You have a lot of election deniers, a lot of people who think that Donald Trump won the election in 2020. Spoiler alert, he did not. He won it in 2024, though. But are there some concerns here about the integrity of elections in Miami-Dade County when you have such incompetent fraudsters? She's a fraudster. She was sentenced for mortgage fraud. You have fraudsters, criminals, and incompetents, and in fact, political operatives in charge of running an elections office in one of the largest, most consequential and diverse counties in the country.
Of course, certainly. But I think more than being concerned about Jenny Nillo, which, you're obviously there's concern about that, but I don't know if in her position she's going to handle ballots. I don't know if she's going to be in the kind of position where she can make policy. Alina Garcia is in the kind of position where she could make policy, where she could make determinations, where she could make voting more difficult. She's, for example, and I'm still following up on this, I have not been able to get answers, but from my reporting, she has done some voter outreach, doing some voter registration signups. They have been in what could be considered Republican strongholds. I don't think she's done any in Liberty City or Aventura or Pinecrest. So I need to find out more about that. But those are the concerns I have. Alina Garcia is in much more position of power at the elections department, and that is going to have much more consequences on us, the voters. So that's my concern.
Yes, the supervisor of boleteros here in Miami-Dade County, Elaine de Valle, find her, and please do, at politicalcortadito.com. Should we spell that, Roy? For the
P-O-L-I-T-I-C.
Not that.
Oh, okay.
They know how to spell political, but
right.
Cortadito.
C-O-R-T-A-D-I-T-O.
So
very good.
What is cortadito, Roy?
Coffee?
Cortadito is like a shot of Cuban coffee with half and half Cuban coffee and milk. So it's like a tiny café con leche, but darker.
I've lived here for 40 years. Really.
Unpasteurized milk, though, Roy. You have to have unpasteurized.
It's better with unpasteurized.
And no
milk,
fluoride. No fluoride in that water.
I have it with 2%. Yeah, no fluoride added.
I need whole milk.
Politicalcortadito.com. Go there.
Thanks for having me.
Read all about it. Thank you so much for being here, Elaine.
Let's do it again. Thanks for having me.
Roy, I studied political science at the University of Miami in a pre-law curriculum with a particular focus on constitutional law. And I had some really wonderful professors, and it was my favorite courses and my favorite part of my time at the University of Miami, and grew to not only through my grandfather, who was a non-practicing attorney, and some of my friends and my professors, grew to have a real kind of profound respect for the Constitution, a very imperfect document, but designed to bring people together under some common ideas and ideals and work together to form a more perfect union, which also meant to not a perfect union, but a more perfect union, meant that this was a works in progress. And as imperfect as it was, and we've talked to our friend Elie Mistal about how spectacularly and uniquely imperfect it was by design, but intended to be improved upon. I get really frustrated, for example, when I see people with T-shirts that say, "We the people, 1776.
Well, especially considering that some of the people who are considered people, slaves.
That is uniquely problematic. And also, the fact is that the year 1776, Roy, was the Declaration of Independence.
Also that.
Not the Constitution, which was drafted in 1787, ratified in 1788, and mostly in place, by 1789. But the words "we the people" were not written in 1776. They were written a decade later. It's just, I'm trying to think of what that,
that means our education system is terrible.
Right. It annoys me because it's like a kind of a proud ignorance, and people study these things, and Incidentally, there are some really fabulous and inspiring and poetic turns of phrase in the Declaration of Independence. If you want to talk about the truths that we hold to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness.
Once again, not all men. Slaves.
More perfect. We could get it more perfect. And in fact, for centuries, almost 250 years, we have been working to get it more perfect. I think the point is that there are quotes you could pull from the Declaration of Independence for your T-shirt that would align with the 1776 date, as opposed to kind of proudly wearing your ignorance. It's just like, just at least get the history of the country right. The history that you're undoubtedly celebrating one way or another, but just get it right. Know the history, understand it. We just watched the president in an interview with ABC News in the Oval Office try to explain his fondness for the Declaration of Independence by basically saying, I love it because it was a declaration of independence, which kind of like has those back to school vibes. Remember, like
independently declared.
Tell me about the Great Gatsby. He was great, like
Gatsby was great.
Rodney Dangerfield, doing his book report, by just repeating the title of the book. But it's concerning for me. I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I'm a fan and a student of the Constitution and of this government and this way of life. And when you have a president that says this,
don't you need to uphold the Constitution of the United States as president?
I don't know. I have to respond by saying again, I have brilliant lawyers that work for me.
What his brilliant lawyers may remind him of is that the presidential oath of office, which is really just one sentence, is this.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute.
That I will faithfully execute.
The office of President of the United States.
The office of President of the United States.
And will, to the best of my ability.
And will, to the best of my ability.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
Preserve, protect, and defend.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
He solemnly swore. There's nothing solemn about that, man. At all.
And when he swears, I don't think he means it in that way.
No, he means it in all way, Fuck.
So when you have a president who isn't certain if the oath of office, which he has now taken twice, consists of protecting and defending the Constitution, and doesn't necessarily know who those laws apply to. The Constitution is supposed to protect, not only define what it means, the role of the government, but the role of the government in our lives and to protect us. That's what the Bill of Rights does, protect us from a tyrannical government, which is really what the Second Amendment was for. Not hearing so much from those Second Amendment folks these days, which is interesting. But when you have a president who isn't sure if his answer to aren't you supposed to protect and defend the Constitution is I don't know, and you have a president who doesn't know who the rules are supposed to apply to, basically saying you have a president who is above the law and does not have to abide by the Constitution, and then starts to identify people who he unilaterally classifies as quote-unquote illegal or not American, and then says the Constitution doesn't apply to you in terms of your protections from the government. I wanted to get a better understanding of this from someone who is, in fact, a constitutional scholar and was, in fact, the most conservative justice in the history, perhaps, certainly top two. I would argue most conservative justice in the history of the United States Supreme Court, Antonin Scalia, who's ideologically was just to the right of the Taliban. He was asked about the application of the Constitution, the 5 freedoms of the First Amendment, for example, and who does the Constitution apply to? We'll leave you today with this. cocaines.
To whom does the First Amendment apply? Do undocumented immigrants have the 5 freedoms?
Oh, I think so. I think anybody who's present in the United States has protections under the United States Constitution. Americans abroad have that protection. Other people abroad do not. They don't have the protections of our Constitution.